knitters, welcome to episode 97 of the Knitty McPurly podcast. I am your host, Devin AT, and this is a podcast about knitting, duh. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I am Knitty McPurly, and you can email me at devin@knittymcpurly.com, and my website is knittymcpurly.com. You can find all of these things linked below if you want to know how to spell them, and subscribe and hit the bell and whatever else you want to click down there. Click them all. Thumbs up. No, thumbs up. How is everyone doing? Oh my gosh, we've had a hurricane. How are all of my Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina friends? I hope you are good. It's interesting because this is the podcast that shouldn't be. I have a friend who, she lives here, but her daughter goes to school down in Florida. So she and her husband have a house down there. And she said, hey, we're going to be at the house, and it's in Fort Myers-ish area. Not exactly sure, but it's around there, you know, like where the epicenter of the hurricane hit. So they were like, hey, we're going to be down there the last weekend in September. Why doesn't everybody come along? So myself and a couple other of our friends got tickets, and we were all ready to go for Friday. I was supposed to be in Fort Myers all weekend. Obviously, Hurricane Ian changed our plans. So here I am in my regular Virginia home studio. So don't worry about me. I got people messaging me because they're like, well, I don't know exactly where you live, but are you okay? I am fine. We have gotten almost nothing here. It's been like some gusts of wind and some rain. I think it's going to be days of rain. The light in here, I've got a light on me. I've gotten so lazy about lights that I just use the natural light by this window, but it's super dark outside, so I do have a regular light on right now. But anyway, Instagram. I just said go follow me on Instagram. I almost never post there anymore. I don't know why. My husband is like, go post on Instagram. You know, people like that. They want to see your stuff. I don't know why I haven't been. But I would like to. Are you guys on Instagram? I know a lot of you are, because when I do post there, I get a lot of, hey, here you are again. But I just need to get better about posting over there. I have a lot of new viewers. Many of you have written to me and said, I found your podcast recently, and I've been going back and watching the old episodes. So I thought I would just do a little quick introduction for those of you who are new, who maybe are finding me for the first time. This podcast actually started in 2016. Isn't that crazy that there's only, 97 episodes? At first, I was doing it monthly, and then I would have a few gaps where there weren't any. But the first 30 episodes were an audio podcast. And then I switched over to video for a couple reasons. I felt like people liked video more because it's knitting and you can see it. But also, it was kind of expensive to host my audio podcast. In fact, I would love to put this one as an audio in addition to the video, but I don't know how to do that for free. Whereas a video, YouTube will host it for free. So anyway, but I have almost 60 episodes that are on video. So if you love it and you want to dive down that rabbit hole, by all means, go ahead. I imagine it's an interesting ride. A lot has happened since I'm not sure what year I went to video, but it was probably 2018, I think. So that's 4 years of the video podcast. I am a shop owner and a knitwear designer. The other day, my daughter called me a YouTuber, and I was like, please don't call me a YouTuber. I have a podcast, but primarily I am a shop owner and a knitwear designer. That's what I do primarily. The podcast serves the business. I am a Christian. If you are a Christian too, then you're in the right place. If you're not, you're still welcome. Love everyone, because that's what we Christians do. We love other people. I'm a homeschool mom. I have 4 kids. My oldest 2 go to a Catholic school that starts in 7th grade. So 6th grade is kind of the graduate from homeschool year in my house. And then they go to Catholic school, which is where my older 2 are. I homeschool my bottom 2. My shop does 2 calendars a year. I have an advent calendar, a yarny advent calendar, and I also do a Lent calendar, which takes you through Lent. Last year, I had kind of inspirational quotes in each box. I don't know if I will do that again this year, but you know, you're welcome to use your favorite devotional as you go through the Lent calendar. That's always nice. But I love that. The Advent calendar tends to be something simpler because Advent is a crazy time of year, whereas the Lent calendar is a more complicated, more mindful design, because I feel like Lent is a sacrificial time of year and we have more time and attention to give to our knitting. Plus, as a season, like in terms of weather, Lent stinks. It's just the worst. It's like the end of winter. It's cold. Still, the cold is clinging on. It's not spring yet, but Christmas is over. Ugh. My birthday is in February, and I feel like that was such a gift that my birthday is in February because it's such a crummy time of year. But the Lent calendar is a lovely thing to have during that time of year too. And those are going to go on sale January 1st, probably at noon, and they're probably going to sell out in an hour because I've learned now how many of something to make, and I know how much I have time to do. So don't worry, I will be talking more about that as that approaches. It's not very soon. It's not even Halloween yet, so we've got plenty of time. I have sweater quantities of yarn in my shop. I have accessories, stitch marker necklaces, stitch markers, scissors, and leather scissor sleeves from Jennifer Young. My scissors and my sleeves are both made in Canada by wonderful small businesses. So I love supporting small businesses because I am one. There you have it. So anyway, it's been kind of a weird week. Again, I feel like I had like 2 or 3 weeks that have just been super weird. I'm not going to talk about this much because it's not about knitting, but my daughter, my youngest daughter, was diagnosed with a visual processing issue and dyslexia. So she's going to start vision therapy. But if anybody, I know a lot of you are homeschool moms. I hear from a lot of you. I know a lot of you homeschool or did homeschool. If you have any tips on, say, phonics curricula, right? Yeah, it's Latin. I know stuff. Or math, I would love to hear recommendations on that. Thank you and thank you. Okay, progress and shop news. This is going to be kind of a weird episode. I feel like I'm going to call this one is the uncomfortable one because I just have a lot of uncomfortable things. I'm a little uncomfortable. I hit a wall over several different things in my life. And it was similar to my 2019 wall that I hit where I just can't knit. I just can't. Like things in my brain are not working right. And my worry is that it is a chemo problem. My brain has not been the same since chemo. I think had I known this in retrospect, I probably would not have done the chemo. I would have just rolled the dice because it's just not the same. I have a test knit going on. And I think what happened is my confidence in my pattern writing ability and my tech editor's confidence in it were both too high. And as a result, when my pattern had some errors, neither one of us went back and checked it with the, what's the word? With the attention to detail that we ought to have. And so when my pattern went to the test knitters, it had more errors than I think I've ever had during a test knit. My testers were frustrated, and they're a wonderful group of people. They've been very kind and very patient, but it's difficult. And I know it's a test knit, like that's the point of a test knit, but still, when you are a medium seasoned designer, somewhat seasoned, then you ought to have fewer errors. So that was a real confidence blow. And I've had to talk myself down off of that ledge and say, look, when you were new, you had errors too. And you had to learn how to make yourself go over it and go over it. And you have to sometimes set it aside and then go back to it. And you just have to tell your tech editor that your brain is not what it was, and I need more in terms of checking and attention to detail. And I never blame her. Mistakes are always my fault. And usually she catches them. She's really good. But I don't know, maybe we were both having an off day / everything else I just said. So anyway, it's all okay now. I think we have them all fixed. It's definitely not, and I'm talking about the Everywhere sweater pattern. It's probably not going to be out when I expected it to. I want to extend the test knit a little bit. I want to be sure to go back over it and make sure that I've made all the corrections. I want that pattern to be good because that's hopefully the bar that I've set. Like I would like for patterns to go out with no errors and for your knitting experience to be great. And if you find something, let me know. I mean, people make mistakes, that happens. Even a designer and a tech editor and a test knit group can still miss stuff. So, you know, we all see things differently. And that's what I love about testers. A lot of times testers will say to me, oh, I've been knitting for such amount of time and I'm a very accomplished knitter, which is great because accomplished knitters know more things. But a new knitter will see different mistakes than an accomplished knitter. So I love having both types in my test groups because it's just input from all sides. Anyway, that's a lot of words to say that I just hit a wall and I lost my mojo, which was a bummer because it is fall. Like this week is like the weather's cooling down and it is it's wet right now, but I love that. It's cold and wet and we're cozy inside and I just want to knit, but I don't. So I thought, what am I going to do? Because I get to that point in the day where I've done all my work. It's like the last half hour of the day and I want to sit on the couch with everyone else and I want to work on a project. So I thought, maybe I'll knit someone else's pattern. So I looked online and boy, it's hard to pick a pattern. When you're designing them, you kind of do what you want. But when you're picking someone else's patterns, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a million. How will I ever pick? And then I thought about doing that vintage pattern that I bought that I showed last week with the, what's the word? Smocking or kind of, it's like smocked / ribbed / ruched, whatever that was. I thought about maybe making that, but I would have had to adjust it because it would have been a little too small as is. And I just don't want to wear something that fitted. I liked the design though, but anyway, I don't know. I wasn't too keen on that. So I picked up an old whip. I went through and I'm like, surely I have something somewhere that I can work on. Can we talk about my hair for a minute? It actually looks much lighter in this light than it does in my mirror. I've been having fun with hair dye. Hair dye is so much fun. There are so many good videos on dyeing your own hair. If anyone is interested in that, I have been learning so much. Anyway, so what this is a whip from 2019. I bound off on it yesterday and it's just plain on the bottom and has a little bit of ribbing. This is not a pattern. This is just whatever I felt like doing. So I have a puff in the sleeve and I finished the bottom and I'm just knitting the sleeve. But this is a really cool yarn. It's a single ply. I think it's 100% merino. This is from Kim Dye's Yarn. And she gave me this yarn years ago. It's a really cool, you can see how it has some other colors in there. It's just a really cool neutral. And this, I feel like I started this in 2019. Got a little hole there. It's funny how things you can't see until you see it in the screen and then it's really obvious. But I'm just playing around basically. I'm not really doing anything. I don't have any notes for this. It's not a pattern. It's just something that I picked up. But it fits really well. And it's kind of a boring, mindless knit. It's just all stockinette. And the yarn is pretty. So I'm working on that, sort of. But that has been good. Like I pick it up and I knit it and I'm like, okay, this feels good. I'm happy about this. So I think I'm gonna go with long sleeves because as I get older, I just like my upper arms less. I remember years ago, people would say to me, you know, don't design things with sleeves that are too short because a lot of people don't want to see their upper arms. And now I'm in that group. I'm good. So I thought originally about making this a short sleeve sweater, but now I think I'm gonna go with long sleeves. This is all the yarn that I have left, but I think I can make it. I think this will do 2 sleeves. This is probably most of a skein. I think, and this will be a 3 skein sweater because this is 2 skeins and then this is what's left. So I think that'll work. And it's funny because I've been a little bummed out about not being able to knit. And it's interesting that that feeling makes me bad at work, but good at people. I found that I was able to respond to people's emails this week better than I normally am. When I get caught up with work, sometimes it's hard to focus on human beings, whether it's the human beings in my life or the ones over email, but I have been better at people than I, maybe normally am when I'm really good at work. It's hard to do everything well. It's like you get this or this. Oh, I wanted to show you my failed cowl too. Hold on, let me go get that. So in the midst of losing my knitting mojo, I was working on this project, which looks kind of amazing when I hold it up. This is a twisted stitch pattern that looks like mermaid scales or fish scales. I just love this pattern. I got this from the Nora Gone Twisted Stitch book. And I just thought it was so pretty. And this is my Morel colorway, which in my humble opinion, this is my favorite colorway in my shop personally. I just love it. It's my postcard. Brooklyn Tweed's color called Postcard. And this is not it, like it's not the same, but it's that color that you're just like, I don't know what that is, but I love it. So anyway, I was just knitting this cowl and I was thinking my original plan for it was for it to be the pattern for the knitting retreat. I was going to do a pattern and a skein of yarn to go with it. And so I wanted it to not roll, but also to not have much of an edge. So this was where I cast it on and I was knitting it bottom up because you see how the scales go. But then somehow when I got to the end, I just thought, oh, I'm gonna make it like have a little break in it like that to fit over the shoulder. So there's one on each side, but the pattern's upside down. See, this is what I'm talking about. This kind of nonsense is what I am talking about, where my brain is just not paying attention in the way that it normally does. I feel like this is not a mistake I would have made before because the pattern is upside down. And who wants this at the top? Ugh, it's just so dumb. But you know how non-knitters are with anything knitted. So I told Gigi's a gift giver. She loves gifts. So this year she has teachers because she has gone off to school. And I said, if you have a teacher that you want to give this to, and the teacher's going to be like, oh, your mom made this. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And they'll never know that it's the dumbest mistake in the whole world. So I guess there's so many good things about this cowl. First of all, the color, that's something I did really well. I love the stitch pattern. That's something that Nora Gone did really well. But the cowl itself as a cowl is just garbage. But that said, some teacher will wear it and not know and just think it's great. Be like, wow, this color's amazing. And I'll say, yeah, it is. Anyway, I kind of decided I like to come up with new things, but every time I come up with something new, I realize, not every time, but a lot of times I'm like, I am one woman and I can do a finite amount of things. And I don't need to have a new pattern for the retreat. I can have yarn that accompanies an existing pattern, right? Right, yes. Anyway, it's all fine. Everything's fine. All right, our topic and word of the week for this week is corrugated rib. We're going to be talking about this topic because I think corrugated rib is kind of awesome. If you are not familiar with corrugated rib, it's basically ribbing in two colors. That's all it is. It sounds like, you're like, it's a color work. It sounds like it's a big deal. Totally not a big deal. It's a ribbing worked in two colors where the knit stitch is worked in one color and the purl stitch is worked in a different color. It's kind of awesome because when it condenses, you might only see the one color or mostly, and then when it stretches, you see that other color. It's really cool. I like it a lot. Let's talk about the word corrugated. This comes from the Latin word cor and ruga. Cor is expressing an intensive force, and ruga or rugare is a wrinkle. So it's corrugare, basically, and it went into the Middle English and became corrugate. From the 1620s, it means wrinkled like skin. So I've got my little corrugations right here. I guess it was an intensive force. It's the force of our whole lives that created these corrugations. From the past participle adjective from corrugate, the earlier adjective was simply corrugate from the early 15th century, from the Latin corrugatus, meaning bent into curves or folds. Now, when that became applied to iron or cardboard for elasticity and strength, that's from 1853. So the use of that, again, Victorian times. So much stuff comes from there, or at least so much stuff we use in our modern life comes from the Victorian period, which, as I say every week, is super interesting. Okay. So I went and looked for some patterns that use corrugated rib. The first one I wanted to show is the Neely sweater by Christina Dene. This is a cool sweater. It has corrugated rib in the top of it, the yoke, and it's just really cool. And I liked this designer. When I went and looked at her Ravelry page, I thought, she reminds me of me. I thought her patterns were great. She has about as many of them as I do. She touches on a lot of different topics in the sense that she does sweaters, she's got hats, she's got all different patterns. She also has her own website, which I went to and looked at that. Also, another example of corrugated rib is this corrugated rib hat by Midnight Sky Fibers. Now this one is, I was going to say interesting, but I actually think I like it a little bit less because it's a 2x2, because I feel like the best thing about that corrugated rib is that those purl stitches kind of go in, and then when you stretch it, you see it. Whereas with the 2x2, you don't really notice that quite as much. Now this one is really cool. This is the corrugated hat and cowl by Purl Soho. And what that means is that this is a free pattern. Most, if not all, maybe all, I don't know, but definitely a lot of Purl Soho's patterns are free because they want you to buy their yarn. So they always show, their yarn and, what you can make with it. Now this is really cool because typically corrugated rib is worked just like stranded color work, where you're holding the two yarns together and you're just doing it like stranded color work, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. However, this one is so smart because it uses mosaic color work. If you're not familiar, mosaic color work is where you use this only one color at a time. And the color that you knit that first stitch with is the color you're going to use for the whole round. And then the other colors you're just slipping. So the directions for this cowl, and I can just read them to you because they're free on Purl Soho's website. For round 1, you've got yarn A, and it's knit 1, slip 1. And then for round 2, you've got yarn B, and it's slip 1, purl 1. So every stitch is getting worked every other round. And by using the mosaic color work, you're getting that 1 by 1, just like you would if you had a stranded color work. But in my opinion, it's a little easier and maybe more fun. I do love a 1 by 1 stranded. I think that's really fun to work. But if you're not used to holding 2 yarns at one time, I am a continental knitter and I will hold them both in my left hand. Some people will do one color in one hand English, in the right hand English style, left hand continental style. People do it all different ways. But if you're like, gosh, I've never done color work before, mosaic color work is not like knitting color work at all because you're only ever holding 1 yarn at a time. If you wanted to very delicately dip your toe into color work, this pattern would be amazing. I feel like, I didn't write it down, but I feel like it is a worsted, but really you could probably, if you're making the cowl, you could use any way you want. For the hat, you're gonna wanna get close to the weight that they used, or you would have to make adjustments to, make it fit if you used a different weight. But this is really cool. In fact, this got me a little bit excited. I might be making this hat. If I get there, maybe. We'll see. I always say that and then I don't have time because I just don't have a lot of time. So, okay. Another fun corrugated rib sweater by Kate Davies is called the Lando Cakes Corrugated Rib Sweater. And I read the little article that she wrote about it, and she said that she had just started weaving and she made this belt. And as a result, she was like, I wanted to knit a sweater that kind of went with the belt and had a similar aesthetic to the belt. And so she made this Lando Cakes sweater, which is really cool. And like everything Kate Davies makes is just great. I think she's a wonderful designer. I went into researching for this episode thinking that corrugated rib and Latvian braid went together. I thought that those things were married somehow because you see them together a lot. And when I learned corrugated rib, it was in a class on corrugated rib and Latvian braid. So I thought that those two things were somehow married, but I couldn't find evidence for that when I did my research. So I think they're just two colorwork techniques that tend to get taught together a lot. They do appear a lot in patterns, such as this Latvian braid hat by Tannis Gray, another wonderful designer. This has corrugated rib and Latvian braid. And here's another hat from the Imagine It yarn shop that also has those two techniques together. Maybe we'll do Latvian braid next week. That's a really fun technique and it looks really cool. I haven't done it in a long time. I would need to go watch a video to remember how to do it. But it's good to learn new things, isn't it? It takes humility to be a beginner, and sometimes we have to remember that, especially people who have a public knitting situation like I do. It's good to be a beginner, because when you're a beginner at something, that means you're learning something new. And if you never do that, then you're never learning. You're not growing. You're just doing what you know over and over again. I just remembered that I wanted to tell you about my sweater. This is a faucet. And for this one, I made this when I was in COVID quarantine. And I had ordered my DK yarn to make my second one, and it hadn't come yet because, it was like, we're talking like April of 2020. That's when I made these. So I held a fingering weight and a mohair together just from my stash, basically. I knit it longer. This is not, the regular length is right about here, but during the, in this part of the faucet, you can knit it as long as you want. I have another one that's full length. You can make it however long you want. But it functions kind of like a vest. I wore this with a jean jacket over it this morning to church, and it was like wearing a vest. The sleeves just come over your shoulders, and I really like it with this shirt underneath. This is one of my new favorite things. But this is just yarn from my stash. Again, fingering weight held double with mohair, which is pretty close to a DK. And my other sweaters, I made the size 2, but this one is the size 3. Which is very similar through the top and only is different when you get to the bust to make a slightly larger bust area. But I really like the way this one fits. I think if I were to make more, I would do it in the size 3. Okay, knitting fantasies. Talking about corrugated rib had me thinking about that, so I went looking for colorwork patterns on Etsy. That was my starting place. I'm like, I'm gonna find some colorwork patterns that we can highlight. And the first one that I found that I really liked is the Teen Away Beanie by Isola Handmade. And I liked it so much. This is a worsted weight hat and it comes in 6 sizes. So as you can see by these pictures, it will fit everyone in the family. And it's really cute and I just really liked it a lot. Looks like stranded color work. It's a $5 pattern and she is a 5-star seller. So I went, so that, you know, that was my starting point, was looking for color work. But once I found this, I was like, I love this lady. I just thought she was great. Now, she doesn't have very many patterns for sale. It looked like 8, I think is how many she had, but I felt like they were worth highlighting. Go check her out on Etsy if you're interested. These are all hats. One is a cowlin hat. So the second one is the twist and slouch hat. This is a very basic hat. Again, worsted weight. This one comes in only 1 size, but it looks like it would be super simple to adapt if you wanted to make it smaller. Also a $5 pattern. Also, the Stonebridge cowl and hat I thought was really cute. I don't do lace in hats because every time I try it, and it has been a number of times, it's a failure. You know how sometimes things are just failures? It just doesn't look good. I'm like, I don't like this. I think it looks dumb. But I feel like she managed to use lace in the hat and in the cowl in a way that looks really nice. Not that I am pro set. I'm not a huge set person. I like things to go without matching, as you can kind of tell by my rather eclectic design. Maybe it's not that eclectic, maybe just a little bit. My last pick from her is the Mega Spun hat. Now this one is super bulky and I thought it was really, really cute. Oh, mohair. I love how she used color change yarns so that as the twist is going up the hat, it looks, you see all these different colors and it just looks really cool. This hat pattern is inexplicably $6, but I have found that this happens in my shop too, where you set all the prices at one point and then when you put in a new pattern, you can't remember what the other ones cost. So you're like, I think it was this. And so yeah, it doesn't really make sense why this one is $1 more, but whatever. Okay, go check out her shop if you're interested in any of these hats. All right, so here's what happened. I got a few stories for So Here's What Happened. This one that I'm going to read to you today, I was unable to print, so I'm going to have to read it off of my screen here. Now, I need to preface this by saying that you might need to have a tissue ready because this is a sad story. It is a story of how a horrible, tragic thing happened. And then the people that it happened to did wonderful Christian things as a result. So it's a wonderful story, but it's also a terrible story. So that's where we are. This is from my podcast watcher named Carrie, and her daughter's name is Peyton. And Peyton's son, James, is the one who the story is about. Carrie says, October is National Infant Loss Awareness Month. I abhor knowing this. It shouldn't be a thing, but here I am dreading October and bearing it all at once. So here's what happened. Almost 9 years ago, I was at the last knitting pipeline retreat that I would ever attend. It was so fun, but as I kept in touch with my very pregnant daughter, I thought surprise grandbaby number 3 might be on the way, so I left and made my way to Texas. Turns out I was wrong, but that just gave me extra time to spend playing with the grands already here and knitting on the baby blanket I was making for the most recent addition yet to come. There's nothing like hanging out in a treehouse with your grands doing your favorite things. So here's a picture of Peyton still waiting on number 3. Finally, the big day came and everything was going perfectly until it wasn't. An ambulance ride, a nurse screaming, baby down, emergency surgery, My baby survives. That's Carrie talking about Peyton, the mom, but hers does not. How can all these angry curse words still be in my brain all these years later? Why are my eyes leaking? Yes, the medical staff performed miracles that day, but in the end, our sweet James died after a short 18 hours. Although I am grateful for those 18 hours, it didn't allow enough time for his Uncle James and his grandfather, lovingly called Dude, to meet him in this life. But Dude did make it soon after. Goodbye for now, my sweet baby James. So what happened next? Not in my wildest imagination could I have foreseen the miracles that were to come. An African baby born not long after James's death was named James in his honor. A funeral in the city of Fort Worth, where hundreds of people heard the message of Jesus' love and the plan of salvation. Lots of therapy and prayer, as one can imagine. And a ministry that ministers to mothers of miscarriage and infant loss that started in the DFW area and has grown to several states, called Gathering Hope. My part in Gathering Hope was minuscule, but has turned out to be bigger than me. Eventually, I couldn't keep up and had to ask for help. You see, Gathering Hope had its first event, and it was rather small. I knit little hearts for each mama to take home as a little remembrance of their baby. I knit them all for a couple years even. I honestly thought these little hearts were absolutely no big deal, but knitting them was making me feel like I was helping my daughter, and it was incredibly therapeutic. The knitting helped to ease my endless crying, numbness, and feeling of hopelessness on how to help my baby girl. These days I have help knitting these little tokens of love, including some who watch Devin's podcast. I couldn't be more thankful for their help, and the mamas who receive them really love them, many of whom have nothing else as a remembrance of their baby. If you or a loved one has suffered a loss, whether it was yesterday or decades ago, I encourage you to seek out support and community at gatheringhope.net and the Gathering Hope group page on Facebook. Thanks for listening, and pass the tissues. You are loved. This picture shows it. So this Gathering Hope group, they're also on Instagram. It's gathering_hope. And it looks to me like it was started by Peyton. She's in a lot of the little videos. But I happen to know, because you guys message me, I happen to know that this happens, and it has happened recently. So go check out this group. I feel like knowing that there are other women out there experiencing the same thing, that helps. And go find the group. It just looks amazing. And Carrie and I had been emailing a little bit more, and she said, I wrote out that story and I forgot to tell you that James was able to give one of his heart valves to save the life of another baby. I don't even know what to say. I love that this group of people, this group of Christians, understand that babies are human beings. And when they die, Jesus holds them in their arms, in his arms. And that's all I have to say about that. What a beautiful, beautiful story. I'm sorry if I have left you in tears. I luckily have read this story several times. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday and happy knitting, and I will see you next week. Bye, knitters.